Hello, good evening or afternoon, depending on when you're watching this, or morning. Today I'm going to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to talk about sort of how industrial countries, Western countries, differ from third world countries in a very fundamental way that's very important, and how it relates to populism and institutions. So I'm going to start with a little bit of what sparked this. So I just got back from a trip to Nepal. And Nepal is has a lot of third world to it. Now, some areas, if you go from like Kathmandu to Everest, it's you're pretty designed for people, Westerners. But if you go where I was, in like down in the southeastern corner in Baghdad area, in the Koshi Trail, like no clean water, very like stoves that are just like holes in the ground, a lot of stuff like that. And I had to experience that, and I have some ideas because I feel like right now, before I was leaving, right before I left the election happened, and Trump won, and Trump is a populist. Now I'm gonna get into what that means in a second. And he's very against institutions. Like, he doesn't like the FDA, he doesn't like the EPA, he doesn't like the education system. He doesn't like a lot of our institutions we have. He says they're wasteful. And if I talk to people who are like, "What's Trump?" who voted for Trump, they're like, "Yeah, he's gonna like, you know, really like defund these like wasteful, corrupt institutions or get rid of them altogether." So, because of that, it kind of got me thinking. So, I think there's a lot of really important topics to have here, and I think it really goes down to, first of all, like, why Western countries exist the way they do. So, one thing I noticed in Nepal is that there's just like little shops everywhere selling everything, for like convenience stores like that sell car parts, and convenience stores that sell medical supplies, and stores that sell hats but also fruit. Like, it's just very eclectic, and it also doesn't look like there's any regulation. Like, it just seems like they get like bamboo and like sheet metal and some rope, and they just like make a shop, and they just stick it up in the middle of like a town. So I live in Georgia. Like, I'm like downtown, midtown Atlanta right now. Piedmont Park's not too far from me. If I went downtown right now and set up in the middle of the sidewalk, or there's no sidewalks really, but like near the sidewalk or around, the police would be there like immediately, like probably within the hour, being like, "What are you doing? You can't do that. This is not a farmer's market. This is not like, this wouldn't even qualify. This is like a homeless shelter. Take it down, or we're gonna give you citation. If you don't take it down immediately, we're probably gonna arrest you for some law you broke." So, which is annoying, because like it's probably be fun to just set up a little shop somewhere and sell something if you had it. The closest we get to these now is probably a yard sale, where it's like on your property, but you couldn't just like if you even in like we don't, even if you own your own property, unless if you're in like a HOA neighborhood, you can't have shit on your lawn for like more than a day or two. Like, they're gonna just shut you down. You're gonna be fined. I'm not familiar with HOA policy, but you're gonna get in trouble. So, I want to talk about this. So, like, some other things that I noticed when I was in Nepal was like restaurants, right? Like, in a restaurant, you can have like a power cord going across the line, and it looks like wires just being run from poles. Like, people are just doing it themselves or paying their buddy to do it for them. And there was electricity everywhere, but it just seemed like done by hand, which is really bizarre to think about. Like the poles were these nests of wires that went every different direction. That couldn't happen here either. That would be immediately shut down by some government infrastructure bureaucracy. And like in America, like if you go into a restaurant, like you expect that, like, the floors are going to be sturdy, the water is drinkable. I mean, the food is not going to get you sick, and if it does, and it keeps getting people sick, that business is going to get shut down quickly by like the FDA. And also, it's interesting to see how like it's okay. People don't like. I was like tripping over, but no one else seemed to care. There's like a giant power cord in the middle of the floor, like not like a power wire, but like an industrial power cord that went to like the back where the breaker was. So that just wouldn't happen here. Also, like some of the buildings, like they looked like they were half done, or like they like got done with concrete and then wood. There was like wood. Like in Atlanta, like the buildings are over 5 stories typically, or like concrete and glass, and they have like a shape that you can sort of tell is following a regulation. That wasn't the case there. Not that there was much building over five stories, but if there were even over 3 stories, it might just be wood at the top. It didn't look decorative. It looked like it was like they just run out of like they couldn't handle any more concrete weight, or maybe they just ran out of concrete and they needed to use wood. So it was just different. And it got me thinking. I read a book by Yuval Noah Harari that talks about early stage capitalism and what you needed to know and what you needed to do. And it's very different to capitalism now, for good, better, and for worse. So like they don't have like there isn't like giant corporations in early stage capitalism that ran everything. It was very like local, which is a good thing. But they're also like you needed to know more to run a business effectively. Like it had to be like now. If I want to start a business, I'm in an institution that helps you start your own business. But so when I did, like there was a person that like knew how to get me my forms together, knew how to get me my ICL forms, knew how to do the taxes, a lot, like get me a lawyer to make some paperwork. A bank was able to open an account. Like it was very like it just sort of happened. It was very easy. And you probably will see a lot like online ads now. Like get your business started in 20 minutes. Like follow these little links. Like there is a ton of legal work that is happening behind the scenes there. That like in Nepal and probably in like other like more ancient civilization, like cultures, you had to know like the laws of that area. You had to know like very specifically the tax rules and the zoning rules, and you had to have like a local supplier for the goods. Like if you were like a shoe builder, make a tanner, right? You would need to find someone who can sell you leather. When that person died, you had to like be quick about it. You couldn't just order it online or go to Walmart. You had to have like this sort of like plan of how you're going to get all your materials, how you were going to like get like if it's something broke, how you're going to get it fixed. Like you had to know a lot more. There wasn't other businesses that filled those gaps. Essentially, people were more generalized. They knew more general knowledge. But we have a saying now about that. It's like a jack of all trades, but a master at none. To be a great business will specialize. Like Apple is not worried about the laws of like the real estate laws where their headquarters are at. They hired someone to handle that for them. And the people that handle that for them do not care how to make computers. But because they trust each other to know what each other to be specialized, they're able, like it all got done, and it got done better than if they had both tried to do each their own, right? So that's just something that we do, right? Like I don't need to know how a drug works. I just need to trust that the American medical institution has processes to vet stuff from going wrong. So that's where we're at. So now let's talk about populism. Okay, so populism. I was watching a Hank Green video about this, and this was fascinating. It talks about how RFK Jr. basically put out this piece or like a little Twitter post about how who's going to be potentially in charge of a wing of our government that is going to handle the FDA, right? And he put out there basically that I wrote this down. So let me read my notes so it makes sense. So the HPV vaccines can cause cancer, right? So that's just not true. So basically what Hank Green did was he pulled up at the New England Journal of Medicine, and which is like an institution that, like, if you went and got like aspirin, they've vetted it, they've done peer reviews tests, they've done all these different they go through all these steps to make sure that like aspirin works. So that's what they do. So they had they showed he showed basically a graph that showed that there was no meaningful difference between people who were vaccinated and not vaccinated to get and the rate of cancer. So, but there was a smart person who noticed that they only, when they were looking at cancer, they only looked at invasive cervical cancer, not non-invasive. So that's a good point. And that's sort of the trouble here, right? So a smart person who's, high IQ would catch in the data set that they cut out a big chunk of the data. They didn't look at non-invasive cervical cancer. And your average person like me, who's not a biologist, would say, well, that looks like they're cutting out something to hide something, because they don't want to have their data not represent what they want to say, which is that the vaccines don't cause cervical cancer. But Han Green points out that the cervical cancer, that like the non-invasive cervical cancer, is basically it's called like stage 0, and it's basically a wart, and most of the time it goes away on its own. And so women are getting tested, like getting their pap smears like every year or so if they're on top of it. They could have like a couple cases, like an individual woman could have a couple cases of cervical cancer that comes up, goes away, comes up, go away. And we don't test for that. We don't have for whatever reason, like the New England Journal of Medicine hasn't just like tested a bunch of women and checked that and see how much goes away. So we don't actually know that a baseline for how many women get non-invasive cervical cancer and their body just beats it on its own, right? So what would happen if you start now? Let's say you do this test though, where you're looking for cancer and you're looking to see if this vaccine causes this type of cancer. You're looking pretty closely. You're probably going to be looking every week or month, and you're probably going to see a lot more non-invasive cervical cancer because it just happens. We don't know the amount that it happens. We just know it happens and goes away a lot. Now, when it comes to invasive, you're going to figure it out or you're going to die from it. So we know that it's 8% or something like that out of 1,000. We'll get that and either get treated or die from it. So, but invasive will pop up. But we don't know. There could be it could be like 30% get non-invasive, but not ever have any symptoms from it their entire lives, and it goes away. So if you were to take if you bring that statistic in, that non-invasive into and say, well, we're now going to count this, then it's going to artificially inflate the result, and the result would be, oh yeah, this drug definitely causes an increase in cervical cancer, definitely, because you've looked at something that no one ever looks at, right? So a good analogy for this would be, like speeding and then getting caught speeding, right? So right now, if I were to just take all, if I were to put a little camera in a car and I'm testing to see if coffee causes you to speed more, right? Then I would want that camera to catch people who, and let's say I don't know though, I have no baseline for how many people speed. I just don't know. I'm sure someone's done a statistic on this, but I have no idea, right? If I were to take all the times that they speed, if my baseline is how many times that they're caught, which is what the cervic thing would be, it would be how many times they're caught. Basically, the police pulls them over and gives them a citation or a ticket. It would be a much smaller number than the amount of time people actually speed. Because for me, I've sped in my car a lot more than I've been caught speeding. A lot, exponentially more, right? And in my only data set is on people who are caught, and I put a camera in that says to see if people speed more when they drink coffee, and I catch all the speeding that they don't get caught. They don't get caught by the police. My data set is going to show that coffee causes speeding, even though that's not actually true. So that's the answer. So here's the problem though. You cannot find this information unless you think about it this way. So if you Google why didn't this so-called why didn't the American Journal of Medicine include this data? If you do like ChatGPT or Google, it's going to be like, well, cervical, invasive cervical cancer is just more deadly, so that's why it's in there. But that's not the full picture. The picture is it's statistically irrelevant because we don't have a baseline on how many women in the country are getting non-invasive cervical cancer and beating it. So we don't have enough data to use that data. That's the answer. But that's impossible to figure out unless you call a researcher up who's an expert on this topic, which like 99% of people don't have access to that. So what do you do, right? Your options are basically blind faith in these institutions, or and then you're going to be right some of the time in like I would be, like trust in this test, you'd be right in this situation. But also there's an argument to be made that there needs to be a check on these institutions, and historically the check has actually been the press. The press's job was to do the research, call the researcher, and figure out what organizations are doing a bad job. But the problem is that now we have the social internet, and this is where populism comes in. So populism is not, first of all, and with Donald Trump, populism is not political. It's apolitical. So what it is saying, I know what's wrong, I know who's wrong, and I can fix it, right? Like Bernie Sanders is a populist. Barack Obama ran a populist campaign. Donald Trump's a populist. Going back, FDR was a populist. Hitler was a populist. We have a lot of populists that have existed in the past. And Hitler and FDR used radio as their form. But radio is a little trickier because you need to be able to afford a radio. And you need to be able to, get by state regulations. You need to have, like the producer has to be able to get by state regulations and hoping they don't get banned. The internet doesn't have any of these issues. You don't need a big institution to run a YouTube channel. You don't need to have a degree in communication. You don't need to be able to buy radio waves. Everyone can talk to everybody. And it just seems like the issue we're running into now is that there's all these organizations now that are complex, like I just described here. This like the American American New England Journal of Medicine is a complex organization. There is two questions that people need to ask whether or not there's, right now canceling is something like getting rid of stuff, like defunding these institutions. There's two questions you need to ask. How easy is it, or should this organization be defunded, and how easy is it to be given reputational harm? Because a lot of the times, the easiest organizations to do reputational harm to are the ones that are complex. It's hard to do reputational harm to a grocery store worker, because what they do is simple. We all understand they check shit out, right? There's not a cabal of grocery workers that are out to get us, right? Nurses. People like nurses because with their job simple. They change bandages. They do what the doctors say. They patch you up when you get hurt. But with doctors, it's a little bit more complex now. We don't really know how they make their decisions, right? That's a little trickier. I don't know if I trust doctors actually, right? And then what about the New England Journal of Medicine? That is a incredibly vague and hard to understand organization. Let's take it one more level higher. Let's take the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. Who understands how that works? Individuals inside of that. So the problem is, if Trump starts to defund these organizations, he'll do it because they're easy to attack, and they're in his way in some way, right? They're in his way in some way. And FDR Jr. doesn't seem to believe in these and he's going to be in charge of these types of organizations. And we're going to be running into a situation where like right now, if I go to CVS and I get a wrong drug and I get sick or I die, it's going to be the FDA that comes after those organizations and fixes the problem. And the reason that they're so careful is because of these institutions that are on their ass. If we weaken these institutions, then we're going, like, even sometimes populism sucks. Like, if we weaken these institutions because we just don't like what the status quo is, we might be left with less in modern infrastructure. I mean infrastructure in a very broad term. I say with the gears that let society run. I like the gears of being able to walk into a CVS, get what I want, and not have to worry about them giving me the wrong drugs. And I think that what people need to really focus on doing is try to as annoying as it is, try to educate yourself on how an organization works, right? There's a lot of good documents and online that you can look into to see how the CDC works, so to learn about how the Food and Drug Administration works, learn about how the New England Journal of Medicine does its research. And I think that that's boring, but it's how we don't destroy the institutions that keep our society moving in the direction that I think most of us like. We just don't like the problem that there's waste in government and that there's corruption. But I think that right now, while the criticism is valid, the solution is not valid. And that's a big thing. A lot of times in populism, you can have a leader point out real issues without providing useful solutions. And that's something that I think is incredibly important right now for everyone to be aware of, and try to do your best to not just to not just believe things because the internet is new and we don't have regulations yet to monitor the internet. But we more importantly don't have mental regulations to stop ourselves from believing podcasters because it's new. Just like how people in the 40s pretty much believed radio and people in the 1400s believed print newspaper. We need to be better than that because we have more to lose. So that's all I really had. I'm probably going to expand on this idea more. But I think that like going to Nepal, it shows the difference of having a bunch of really strong government bureaucracies and not having that. And I like what we have here. So yeah, that's all I have.